Hi, I'm Dawn and this is Where Shabby Meets Bling. You probably just finished watching two incredible holiday projects from Annie in Miami and from Monica over in Philly. Well, now you've made it to the Midwest for my first stop on this festive Christmas playlist stroll. Because you are watching 2523 Candy Cane Lane, a festive Christmas playlist stroll. I am being joined by my friends Annie from Crafting with Indiana Jones and Monica from Up All Night DIY. You will find the links to their channels and the 6-video playlist in the description box below. To create my holiday project, I am going to be using a whole lot of styrofoam. I'm talking a lot. I am going to try to recreate a vintage styled reindeer. Just for a frame of reference, here's what I'm shooting for. Don't know if I'll hit the mark, but I'm trying to recreate like a stuffed animal that you would have seen way back in the day, like the old Velveteen Rabbit stuffed animal. And I'm just gonna use styrofoam to sculpt its entire body. Right now, I'm working on his little head and his little snoot, his little muzzle. This is gonna be a young reindeer. He's gonna be just a young calf. I think that's what you'd call a reindeer. I'm not quite sure. I should look it up. Google it. I am going to place the snout into the body of the head, the main part of the head, with just, and right now it's temporary, just see if I like the way it's coming about. And I will eventually secure it with hot glue. But I need to get the proportions right, because if I don't, it's going to look like a duck or a dinosaur or something that is just not recognizable at all as a reindeer. So I sand and I carve and I sand and I carve, and then I will hot glue the little muzzle onto the main part of the head, onto the skull. Now I'm going to use my sanding block to actually carve in his little features. I am working on his little mouth right now. I've already given him some brows so that there's a little bit of dimension on his head. And I've designated where his eyes are going to go just real lightly. But there's his brow. And he's gonna get a little nose. I am using a sanding disc, very fine, not sure of the grit, but very fine, to really get some dimension in his little mouth area. And then I'm going to turn it on its side, the paper, and lightly, real lightly, give the differential between the two nostrils, just so that you can see very lightly where that would be. And this will get painted. His muzzle, his little nose, everything's gonna get painted. This is Dawn Jones we're talking to. We paint here. Oh, cute little nose. Now his entire head is going to get painted, and it will get a couple of coats because we need to make sure that its little pores are sealed. We have to make sure that, because spray paint's coming, and spray paint's always coming. Once the spray paint comes, we have to make sure that the pores are sealed so he doesn't shrivel up into nothingness and disappear. I have already painted his little nose and the eye cavities, and that's just kind of a temporary thing to signify to me as I'm doing this where everything's at and how it's gonna look, because I need to know proportions and scale. But right now I am adding a coat of the Mod, and this is once again to seal it. You really need to seal this thing well. But you can see his little deer face. He's got a little deer face, and he's coming together. To make the ears, I'm just using scrap of foam. We know I love my scrappy foam, and for good reason, for purposes just like this. I've already cut out and formed one ear, and now I'm just doing the same for the opposite side, I'm gonna flip them around so they're identical but mirror images. And I'm just gonna cut it out, and then I will sand it so the edges are smooth and rounded. And then we have 2 ears, or he has 2 ears. They're his ears. On to his body. I will be using these components and carving them down and sanding them down so that we've got the base of his body and a couple of little legs. Because I need some little legs. So I have the base of his body ready, and I've got 1 leg carved. And now I need to duplicate that leg. And that's the tough part, is to duplicate items so that they're the same size and same shape. Both the legs need to be the same, his 2 little arms need to be the same, his eyes and the ears need to be the same. So this is where it gets a little difficult. A little fine tuning by carving and sanding, and we will have his other leg ready. If you notice, they look, what I'm trying to get them to look like are little jointed legs. Like this would be like a jointed teddy bear, but he's gonna look like a jointed reindeer, a little cute stuffed animal. Hopefully, hopefully. And now we paint his little body. And his little legs and his little arms. I did make him some arms, but I figured you didn't have to suffer through that. You already watched me make the legs, and the arms were pretty similar, although I gave him joints. And the legs I added from the knee down. That was just his femurs. It was his thighs. His cute little reindeer thighs. So paint we will. Here you can see his little components. There's his little arms, his body, and his legs. And I've made hooves, so it will behoove you to watch to the end to see his hooves. But I'm just giving it a light sand, and then I'm gonna hit it with Mod Podge. Seal those pores, very important. Here's the fun part. Here's the tricky part. Here's the hard part. I am covering his entire body with quilt batting. This is going to emulate fur, like the fur you would get on those old-timey little stuffed animals. And I am covering his entire body, leg by leg, arm by arm, his body, his little tail, and his head. And you have to be very slow and methodical because I don't want to sew it. I don't want to glue it. I am tucking into his little body parts. As you can see, I already assembled him. Stephanie. And I am taking my time because this is what you're gonna see. This is what you're gonna see. This is his finished coat. So very carefully, I'm using a sculpting tool to tuck the batting down into the joints. I'm almost done. I have his arm and his head and his ears and tail to go, but this is what he's gonna look like. And then he's gonna get spray painted. And I will paint his hooves. There's his hooves. And I will paint some other little parts of him. This is what his head looks like pre-spray paint. I really did make a reindeer, not a seal, and he is not getting acupuncture. The pins are to keep the batting in place while I spray paint. Our little guy, I am going to name him Randolph. Randolph needs some antlers. And I picked up this pick at Walmart back in the Christmas section. This is just wired plastic with some glittery stuff on it, some blingy stuff. And I thought these would be perfect to make antlers. So I'm going to uncurl them and cut them down, peel off the blingy stuff, and then I'm going to form them into the shape I want them. And then I'm going to start adding layers of hot glue. Layer upon layer upon layer of hot glue. You need to take your time and remember that you need to do 2 antlers and they should look relatively the same. This is what they're going to look like after many layers many, many layers of hot glue. But you can see they're starting to look like antlers. Next, I am going to spray paint them and sand them, and then spray paint the top of the sand to give them the look and texture of antlers. Antlers are important, but more so our eyes. Little Randolph needs some eyes, and once again, I'm just using Styrofoam. These are 1-inch balls, and I am coating them in a white chalk paint. They will get 2 coats of white chalk paint, and then they will get 1 coat. After sanded, I'm gonna sand them after the 2nd coat. Then they're gonna get a coat of matte Mod Podge, and then we let them dry. I am using a chalk paint to begin his iris on his eyes. And this is, the color is called Cashew. And once I'm done with the cashew, I will add some highlights to his iris. I'm using caramel, and chocolate brown to finish off the iris. And then I will come back in with black chalk paint and create his pupils. Then I will go over them again with matte Mod Podge because I want just a little bit of a sheen to it. I don't want super shiny because this is supposed to look vintage. Randolph needs something to stand on, so we're going to create a base for him. And you know I like elevated bases. So I am going to use these 3 items. I picked up the wood round at Hobby Lobby, I believe, and the other 2 pieces were from a thrift shop. And I am going to glue them together, wood glue them together, and clamp them and let them sit overnight. No fuss, no muss on this base. This is just going to be painted white chalk paint. And the other thing I am going to do is, because a couple of these pieces aren't level, they're not flat, they don't meet properly, I'm going to take my dimensional white paint, my slick white paint, and I'm going to fill in the cracks that may be showing where each of these little wood pieces meet. And after my dimensional paint is dry, I will come back and I will give it another coat of white chalk paint. And that's it. That's all this little base gets. Simple. Randolph is complete, but he needs a wreath. He's gonna be holding a wreath. And I picked up this set of 3 little gold hoops at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be using the middle-sized one. And I also picked up resale this little wreath, and I knew at some point I would tear it apart to use the evergreen for something. I'm using floral tape to cover the gold. This will help me in 2 different ways. It covers the gold, and B, it helps. It doesn't like stick. I don't know if you've ever used floral tape, but it kind of like holds things in place. And as you gently pull the tape, it sticks to itself. So it's a great little item to use in a circumstance like this. I am just using individual pieces of this evergreen, and I am wrapping it around my little hoop that has been covered with that floral tape. And I'm going to go all the way around this little hoop to create my wreath. I picked up this little tiny garland, this blingy garland at the Dollar Tree. I don't like the stars, so I'll probably cut those off if I do use it. But I am, for sure, I'm going to use this evergreen and these frosted berries in my wreath, just as little accents. I will be using this faux leather felt on little Randolph's eyelids, kind of as eyelashes or eyelids. Take it however you want. I just spoke with Randolph. He would like to meet all of you, and he has a special skill he would like to share. Say hello to Randolph. Randolph the reindeer. He is very pleased to meet you all. You know that special skill he has? Yes, he's going to share it with you in a moment, but first he would like you to admire his big, beautiful eyes and his little nose and his ruffled old fur. Doesn't he look like a vintage stuffed animal? Very pleased with the way our little guy turned out. You get a good look at his antlers there. And those were from silly little Christmas pics. Cheap pics. But look how they came out. Keep in mind, he is made 100% of his body is styrofoam. Every bit of it. Just carved styrofoam. And his hide, his little fur, is batting. Quilt batting. And some spray paint. Once again, his eyes even are styrofoam balls. His hooves, styrofoam. You know, Randolph has a pretty famous cousin. You may know him. There's stories about him. And he's always been overlooked as well in those reindeer games. But now he's not overlooked because Randolph has a special skill. That special skill is hula hoop. And he uses his mom's wreath when he practices. And he is good, and you could see by the little grin on his face that he knows he is, and he's gonna win this year's reindeer games. Thank you, Annie and Monica, for joining me in this festive Christmas playlist stroll. The links to their channels, as well as this very special 6-video playlist, is in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like. Share it with your family and friends. And anyone that loves Christmas, Christmas decor, and vintage items. Leave me a comment. I love to hear from you. You can follow me on Instagram and check out my shop on Etsy. You can show your support of this channel by subscribing, so don't forget to subscribe. But for now, this is Dawn with Shabby Meets Bling. We'll see you next time. And thank you so much for watching. Playlist stroll continues with Annie down in Miami. Stay tuned for her throwback video. You'll be glad you did.